Before we start, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the official courtroom testimony of the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs as reported by Inner City Press. No one in the packed courtroom was prepared for what happened next. The prosecutor's voice carried a gravity that made the entire courtroom lean forward. The prosecution calls Justin Drew Bieber to the stand. A collective gasp echoed through the gallery. This was the witness everyone had speculated about but few believed would actually appear. Justin Bieber, the global superstar who had grown up in the public eye, whose every triumph and struggle had been documented by millions of fans, was about to reveal the darkest chapter of his meteoric rise to fame. The man who walked through the courtroom doors bore little resemblance to the confident pop star the world knew. Gone was the swagger, the designer clothes, the carefully crafted public image. Instead, Justin Bieber appeared fragile, almost ghost-like, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had been shattered and was still learning how to walk among the pieces. He wore a simple gray suit, his hands trembling slightly as he approached the witness stand. His wife Haley sat in the front row, her face a mask of supportive composure that couldn't quite hide the fear in her eyes. This testimony could save other victims, but it might also destroy what remained of their marriage. As Justin took the oath, his voice was barely audible. When he finally looked up at the jury, his eyes carried the weight of secrets that had been eating him alive for over a decade. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I was 13 when I met Sean Combs. I thought I was meeting a mentor who would help my career. I had no idea I was meeting the man who would steal my childhood and nearly destroy my life." Justin Bieber's testimony began with the story that millions of fans knew a small-town Canadian boy discovered on YouTube thrust into global stardom before he could understand what that meant. "I was just a kid from Stratford, Ontario." Justin testified, his voice soft but steady. "My mom was a single parent. We didn't have money, and suddenly I had this opportunity that seemed like a miracle. When Usher wanted to sign me, when all these industry executives were interested in my career, it felt like all our prayers had been answered. But what the public didn't know was how quickly that dream became a nightmare." "The industry moves fast when you're a hot commodity," Justin continued. "One day, I'm uploading videos from my bedroom. The next, I'm in meetings with some of the most powerful people in entertainment. I was 13. I didn't understand the game being played around me." Justin described his first encounter with Diddy as seemingly innocent. "It was at an industry party in 2009, right after I signed with Island Records. Sean approached me, said he'd been watching my career, that he was impressed with my talent. He positioned himself as someone who could help me navigate the industry. The initial relationship appeared to be standard industry mentorship. Sean would invite me to studio sessions, introduce me to other artists, give me advice about the business side of music. My team thought it was great. Here was this mogul taking a personal interest in my development." But Justin's testimony revealed that even in those early interactions, there were warning signs that the adults around him either missed or chose to ignore. Sean would make comments about my appearance, about how special I was, about how the industry could be dangerous for someone so young and innocent. At the time, I thought he was being protective. The grooming process was gradual and sophisticated. Sean would test boundaries slowly, a hand on my shoulder that lingered too long, conversations that became increasingly personal invitations to private events, where I was often the only minor present. Justin described feeling simultaneously flattered by the attention and uncomfortable with the increasingly intimate nature of their interactions. "I was 13, 14 years old. I wanted to be accepted by these successful adults, but something in my gut told me that what was happening wasn't normal." The courtroom fell into complete silence as Justin Bieber prepared to describe what he called the worst 48 hours of my life, a period that would be referenced in industry circles for years, but never fully explained until now. February 2010. Justin said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I was 14 years old. Sean invited me to what he called a mentorship intensive, 48 hours where he would teach me everything I needed to know about being a successful artist in the music industry. Justin described being picked up by Diddy's security team and driven to a private compound in the Hollywood Hills. My management team thought it was a great opportunity. They saw it as Sean taking me under his wing, giving me exclusive access to his knowledge and connections. The compound was isolated and heavily secured. No phones were allowed, no outside contact, no distractions. Sean said it was important for me to be completely focused on learning that the outside world would just interfere with the process. What happened over those 48 hours would haunt Justin for the rest of his life. Sean introduced me to what he called industry education lessons about power control and what he said were the real rules of the entertainment business. The education began with psychological manipulation. Sean would alternate between treating me like his protege and humiliating me, making me feel special one moment and worthless the next. He said this was teaching me how to handle the ups and downs of fame. But the manipulation quickly escalated to physical abuse. Sean said that to be successful in the industry, I needed to learn about submission, about taking direction, about doing whatever was necessary to please the people who controlled my career. Justin's description of the sexual abuse was clinical, but devastating. Sean told me that what was happening was normal, that all successful artists had gone through similar experiences, that this was just part of paying my dues in the industry. The teenager was threatened with the destruction of his career if he ever spoke about what happened. Sean made it clear that he had the power to end everything: my record deal, my career, my family's financial security. He said that if I ever told anyone, no one would believe me anyway. When Justin was finally returned to his team after 48 hours, he was a changed person. Everyone noticed that something was different, but they attributed it to the intensity of working with Sean, to the pressure of the industry. No one suspected that I had been systematically abused. Following the 48-hour ordeal, Justin Bieber's behavior and public persona underwent dramatic changes that were documented by media outlets worldwide, but never properly understood until his testimony. After those 48 hours, I wasn't the same person. Justin testified, his voice heavy with the weight of that transformation. The innocent kid from Canada was gone. In his place was someone who was angry, confused, and carrying trauma that I didn't even understand yet. Justin described how the abuse affected every aspect of his life and career. I started acting out in ways that seemed random to everyone around me, but were actually responses to the trauma I had experienced. The partying, the reckless behavior, the conflicts with authority, it was all connected to what Sean had done to me. The media documented Justin's increasingly erratic behavior throughout 2010 and 2011, but framed it as typical teenage rebellion rather than trauma response. Everyone saw the symptoms, but no one understood the cause. I was labeled as a spoiled pop star who couldn't handle fame, when really, I was a traumatized child trying to cope with abuse. Justin's relationship with Diddy continued during this period, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Sean would check in periodically, remind me of our special relationship, make sure I understood that our secret was safe. It felt like being stalked by my own trauma. The ongoing psychological manipulation was sophisticated and relentless. Sean would send gifts, invite me to events, publicly praise my work, all while privately reminding me that he owned a piece of me, that our bond was permanent. Justin described feeling trapped between his public success and his private torment. My career was exploding. I was achieving everything I had dreamed of, but I felt hollow inside. The success felt tainted because I knew what I had endured to get it. The teenager began using substances to cope with the psychological pain. I started drinking, using drugs, anything to numb the memories and the shame. Everyone saw it as typical rock star behavior, but it was really self-medication for trauma. Justin's testimony revealed that many of his most publicized incidents during this period were directly related to his abuse. The arrests, the conflicts with paparazzi, the relationship drama. It was all me trying to regain some sense of control over my life after having it stolen from me. In one of the most chilling portions of his testimony, Justin Bieber revealed how his artistic work had contained hidden messages about his abuse for years. Messages that fans and critics had interpreted as creative choices rather than cries for help. Artists process trauma through their work. Justin testified his voice growing stronger as he discussed his music. For years, I was putting clues about what happened to me in my songs, my videos, my performances. I was screaming for help, but I was doing it in code because I was too afraid to speak directly. Justin's 2020 song Yummy became a focal point of his testimony. That song wasn't about food or relationships like people thought. It was about being consumed, being devoured by powerful people in the industry. The music video showed me surrounded by adults at a dinner party being served up like I was the meal. The symbolism in the Yummy video was deliberate and specific. The imagery of being surrounded by older, powerful people who were literally consuming me. That was my way of telling the world what had happened without saying it directly. I was the yummy thing being eaten alive by the industry. Justin described other songs that contained references to his abuse. So many of my lyrics about feeling lost, about being used, about wanting to go back to innocence, those weren't just general themes about fame. They were specific references to what Sean had done to me. The artist's frequent references to his faith and redemption took on new meaning in this context. My spiritual journey, my relationship with God that was me trying to heal from trauma, trying to find something pure after being contaminated by evil. Justin testified about the frustration of having his pain misinterpreted by audiences. I would put my heart, my trauma, my truth into a song, and people would just see it as entertainment. They were dancing to songs about my abuse without realizing what they were really hearing. The coded messages extended beyond music to his social media presence and public statements. Sometimes I would post cryptic messages, make seemingly random comments about the industry, hint at dark truths. I was testing the waters, seeing if anyone would understand what I was really saying. But the most devastating aspect was the isolation these coded messages represented. I was surrounded by millions of fans, industry professionals, media attention, but I felt completely alone because no one understood that I was asking for help. Justin Bieber's testimony took an intensely personal turn as he described how his unresolved trauma had brought his marriage to Hailey to the brink of collapse, particularly as the federal investigation into Diddy intensified. "Hailey saved my life," Justin said, his voice breaking as he looked toward his wife in the courtroom. "But even she couldn't save me from the demons I was carrying. The trauma from Sean, the secrets I was keeping it, was poisoning everything good in my life." Justin described how his PTSD symptoms had intensified as news of the federal investigation became public. Every headline about Sean, every new revelation about his crimes, it was like reopening wounds that had never properly healed. I started having panic attacks, nightmares, dissociative episodes. The psychological pressure of potentially testifying had pushed Justin to a breaking point. I knew that eventually I would have to face what happened, that I would have to tell the truth publicly. But the thought of reliving that trauma, of having it scrutinized by lawyers and media, it was overwhelming. Hailey had been unaware of the full extent of Justin's abuse until the federal investigation began. I had told her bits and pieces over the years, but never the complete truth. When the investigation started and I realized I might have to testify, I finally told her everything. The revelation had devastated their relationship. Hailey was angry that I had kept so much from her, hurt that I hadn't trusted her with the truth, terrified about what testifying would mean for our privacy and safety. She felt like she was married to a stranger. Justin described months of intensive therapy and counseling as they worked to save their marriage. We had to rebuild our relationship from the ground up. Based on complete honesty this time, Hailey had to understand the trauma I was carrying, and I had to learn how to be vulnerable without being destructive. The decision to testify had been the most difficult of Justin's life. I knew that speaking out could help other victims, could prevent Sean from hurting more children. But I also knew it could destroy my marriage, my mental health, my career, everything I had worked to rebuild. Hailey's support had ultimately made his testimony possible. She told me that she would rather be married to someone who told the truth and faced the consequences than someone who lived with lies and let evil continue. That gave me the courage to come forward. But the process had taken a severe toll on both of them. We're still fighting for our marriage every day. The trauma doesn't just go away because you decide to speak out. Healing is a long process, and it affects everyone who loves you. Justin Bieber's testimony provided a damning indictment of the entertainment industry's willingness to sacrifice children to protect powerful predators. Everyone knew. Justin said, his voice filled with anger and pain. My management team, record label executives, other artists, media outlets, they all knew something was wrong. But no one wanted to ask the hard questions because Sean was too valuable to the industry. Justin described how his obvious trauma symptoms were consistently misinterpreted or ignored by industry professionals. I was clearly struggling, clearly in pain, clearly exhibiting signs of abuse. But instead of investigating or offering help, they just managed my image and kept the money machine running. The teenager's erratic behavior was treated as a publicity problem rather than a cry for help. When I would act out, when I would have breakdowns, when I would make concerning statements, the response was always about damage control, never about getting me the help I needed. Justin testified about adults in his orbit who he believed suspected the truth, but chose silence over action. There were people who worked closely with both me and Sean who had to have noticed the patterns, the changes in my behavior after spending time with him. But speaking up would have meant risking their own careers. The complicity extended to media outlets that covered his struggles. Reporters and bloggers made careers out of documenting my pain, but none of them ever investigated why a successful teenager would be so obviously struggling. They were profiting from my trauma while ignoring its source. Justin described feeling abandoned by an industry that claimed to care about his well-being. Everyone wanted to be associated with my success, but when I needed protection, when I needed someone to ask the right questions, I was on my own. The systematic nature of the cover-up became clear as Justin's testimony continued. This wasn't just negligence or ignorance. There was an active effort to protect Sean's reputation and business interests, even when it meant sacrificing the safety of children. Justin's experience revealed how the industry's financial incentives created a culture of willful blindness. Sean generated billions of dollars in revenue for record labels, media companies, fashion brands. My trauma was considered acceptable collateral damage for that level of profit. Justin Bieber's testimony reached its emotional climax as he described the moment he realized he could no longer remain silent about his abuse, regardless of the personal cost. The breaking point came in early 2024. Justin said, his voice steadied despite the tears streaming down his face. I was watching the news coverage of Sean's arrest, seeing other victims come forward, and I realized that my silence was enabling his crimes to continue. Justin described the psychological impact of seeing Diddy's other victims testify. Hearing their stories, seeing their courage, it made me realize that I wasn't alone, that what happened to me was part of a pattern, that my testimony could help build a case that would prevent future abuse. But the decision to come forward was complicated by the potential consequences. I knew that testifying would mean reliving the worst experience of my life in public, that it would subject my family to scrutiny and potential retaliation, that it could damage everything I had worked to rebuild. The turning point came during a conversation with another survivor. Someone who had been through a similar experience told me that healing wasn't possible, while keeping secrets that the trauma would continue to poison my life until I faced it completely. That conversation changed everything. Justin's decision was ultimately motivated by his desire to protect other children. I kept thinking about 14-year-old me, how alone and scared I was, how no one came to help. I realized that if I didn't speak out, there would be other kids in that same situation, and I would be partly responsible for their suffering. The process of preparing to testify had been grueling. Working with prosecutors, going through evidence, reconstructing memories I had tried to bury it was like undergoing surgery without anesthesia. But I knew it was necessary. Justin described the support he had received from other survivors and advocates. There's a whole community of people who have been through similar experiences, who understand the courage it takes to speak out. They helped me find the strength to do what I thought was impossible. The final factor in his decision was his faith. I believe that God gives us experiences, even terrible ones, for a purpose. Maybe my purpose is to use my platform, my visibility, to expose evil and protect innocence. If that's true, then staying silent would be betraying that purpose. As Justin Bieber prepared to conclude his testimony, he addressed the broader implications of his decision to speak out about his abuse. I know that coming forward won't undo what happened to me. Justin said, his voice growing stronger with each word. The trauma, the lost innocence, the years of pain, that's permanent. But maybe my testimony can prevent it from happening to someone else. Justin spoke directly to other survivors who might be watching. If you're out there carrying secrets like I was, know that you're not alone. Know that the shame doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people who hurt you. And know that speaking out is possible, even when it feels impossible. He addressed the industry that had both elevated and failed him. The entertainment industry has a choice to make. It can continue protecting predators and sacrificing children, or it can choose to prioritize safety over profit. My testimony is a challenge to make the right choice. Justin's words to his fans were particularly poignant. To everyone who has supported me over the years, who has seen me struggle and wondered why, now you know. Your love and support helped keep me alive during the darkest times. Thank you for not giving up on me. Looking directly at Diddy for the first time during his testimony, Justin delivered his final statement. Sean, you stole my childhood, my innocence, my sense of safety in the world. You made me believe that abuse was the price of success, that silence was survival. But you were wrong. The truth is more powerful than fear, and justice is more important than career. Justin's voice broke as he concluded, I was 13 when you destroyed my life. I'm 30 when I'm finally taking it back. To every child out there who dreams of stardom, you shouldn't have to sacrifice your soul to achieve your dreams. That ends now. The courtroom remained in stunned silence for several moments after Justin finished speaking. His testimony had been devastating in its honesty, courage in its vulnerability, and powerful in its implications for both the case and the industry. As Justin stepped down from the witness stand, he walked directly to Haley, who embraced him, as both wept openly. The performance of his lifetime hadn't been on stage or in a recording studio. It had been in a federal courtroom, speaking truth to power, and finally breaking free from the chains of his own silence. Outside the courthouse, Justin and Haley faced a massive crowd of supporters, fans, and media. His statement was brief, but powerful. Today I reclaimed my voice. Tomorrow I'll use it to make sure no child ever has to endure what I endured. The entertainment industry would never be the same. The boy who had been discovered on YouTube had just delivered the testimony that would reshape how the world understood fame, power, and the price of silence. The child star was finally free.